That's true. Yes, Brother Tom Holland tells the story of going to visit someplace, and yes, yeah, very true. Is my face red yet? Yeah, probably is. Also, Alzheimer's Foundation of America, one of the best things about them, I don't agree with everything they do, but I'm a professional care partner with them. They have social workers 7 days a week that you can talk to completely free if you have a question about your loved one or your situation or you, as the case may be. 866 232 8484. 866 232 8484. And so that was just one of the magazines. Typically, I tear it all up because I get articles and I'm putting them in certain places and whatever, but they'll send that to you, I think, every other month. Another good thing that they do is that you are wanting to take care of yourself in regards to your own mind, because you may think, with everything I've got going on or whatever, I'm beginning to slip and whatever. They'll set up a time for them to give you a test over the phone completely free. And then just sort of say, hey, you're doing fine, or you got 20 out of 30 right, or whatever the case may be. It's only about a 5 to 10-minute test. But I try to do that at least twice a year and just sort of see where I am and make sure, everything is good in that regard. Well, I'm Don Williams, and that's Ron in there. And so if you want to learn about cancer, he's been a cancer counselor for some 20 years at one of the hospitals there in Huntsville, Alabama. I lived for the last 30 years in Florence, Alabama, but last December we moved outside of Gallatin, Tennessee, halfway between kids and grandkids. And so you know how that is. And so my wife had the idea, if you build it, they will come. And we've already had 100 visitors and family. And so they'll be coming back Christmas, and that's always great. But anyway, but we've been doing grief support workshops and classes for over 30 years. Both of us being ministers, wanted to just better minister to our people and began doing that and learning that way. And since 2012, we've been doing workshops on dementia and cancer, him handling the cancer side, me handling the dementia side, because it became personal. On Thursday, June the 9th, 2016, 5:30 in the afternoon, my cell phone rang, and it was a neurologist, Dr. Marissa Nadelson from the UAB Birmingham, Alabama Kirkland Clinic. And she said, after studying the most recent MRI from your mother, Dot Williams, the one we took 3 years ago to what we just took now, I see significant shrinkage in the brain. The diagnosis is dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. So our journey began. We already were noticing Mom was slipping and saying some of the same things and whatever, but now we had a diagnosis. And she would die 39 months later, July the 19th, July 13th, 2019. And so I do this in her memory. I do this in her honor. My dad was a preacher of the gospel for 66 years. I tell people, because of Joe Williams, I'm a better preacher, but because of Dot Williams, I'm a better minister. And that's what I try to do and whatever. So with that idea in mind, why don't we take a test? And let's look at these, and we'll talk about these as well. Number one, the word Alzheimer's is of German origin and means demented or out of mind. The answer is false. False. In 1901, Dr. Lois Alzheimer, a neurologist, pathologist, and psychiatrist, began to treat a patient of his by the name of Augusta de Tour. She had some mind issues. When she died in 1906, the family allowed him to dissect the brain and said it was like Swiss cheese. Cells of the brain were tied up in knots like a rope. They also found amyloid and tau, T-A-U, plaque in it. And when he gave his findings the next year, they named this after him, Alzheimer's disease. Number two, in any given audience, 30% of the people or someone you love will one day experience dementia. The answer to that is false. Dr. David Hutchings, who has, as a neurologist, done a great deal of work in Boston, Massachusetts, said that in any given audience, 53% of the people will either one day themselves have dementia or have someone they know develop dementia. Now, that doesn't mean half of all of us are going to have dementia, but someone that we know. Because in this audience, how many of us know someone who have dementia? Yeah, every one of us almost. Sure. So that's the point. It's not half of all people will. The percentage basically is about 13%. Folks under the age of 65 will have dementia, and about 47% of people after the age of 85 have it. But we just need to understand that in any given audience, there are people who will know or else have someone that does deal with that. Well, there it is. Dementia studies that if a family member has Alzheimer's, then there's a 50% that they will develop this disease. That's the fear, but the answer is false in that regard. That's the fear that if somebody in our family has it, then automatically we're going to have it, like it can be inherited. This is my wife's greatest concern because her great-grandmother at age 85 had it. What they used to call hardening of the arteries, back those days. Her grandmother at age 75, Mama, developed it, and her mother at age 65. Notice the progression or digression, as the case may be. And then 2 aunts. There's 3 components that enter into a family in regards to the dementia and the possibility of them having it. The number one idea is family history. Are there family members in your family that have dementia? That's one thing. The second thing, the age that they acquired that disease. The younger they acquired it, the possibility is that you may be more susceptible to having it because it was earlier in their lifestyle, if you know what I mean. Anything 65 and younger is called early onset dementia. And in America, some 200,000 people have that. And it came before the age of 65. And so if you have several family members with that, then there's an increased possibility that that might be something. The third thing has to do with how close were you to them? Is this your parent or is this a great uncle? Big difference between a parent having the dementia versus a great uncle having the dementia. With that idea, I want to give you a study that was done at the University of Utah. Interestingly enough, Cherokee Indians only have a 12% chance of getting it. And so something about those native genes, if you will, that perhaps helps in that manner. 2019, team researchers from the University of Utah, Utah State University, Brigham Young's, and others studied the Utah population database. And this is just back to Utah. But they went back to the 1800s, 12 ancestors. They studied more than 270,000 people, including 4,436 that had some degree of dementia. What they did was they looked at what they referred to as first-degree relatives. Those are parents, children, and siblings, those closest to you. Then they looked at the families of second-degree relatives, grandparents, grandchildren, aunts and uncles, nephews and nieces. Then they did a study of those third-degree relatives, great-grandparents, great-grandchildren, grandnieces, and grandnephews, great aunts and great uncles. Here's what they found. Those who had one or more first-degree relatives, parents, children, your brothers and sisters, if they had it, then there was a greater risk, 1.73 more likelihood to develop the disease in your own life. If people had 2 first-degree relatives, the mom and the dad who had it, it was 4 times more likely to develop that disease. Those who by chance had 4 first-degree relatives, 2 parents and 2 siblings, for example, almost 15 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's. So it doesn't have to be, it's not automatic in any way, but the more it's in your family, the greater the concern. Now, there are testings that can be done. There are genetic testings. There's blood work that can be done. They're beginning to do more. In fact, in the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, I believe there was an article about the blood work that people can do to predict the possibility of it. But it's important to keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be automatically a death sentence, or even I'm going to get it because so-and-so and so-and-so had it. Again, the age, how close they were to you, and how many. Does that make sense? Here's what I'm hanging my hat on. A study showed that the children of a mother who lived beyond the age of 85 and a father who is above the age of 83 who did not have Alzheimer's until after those ages, their children have a 40% less chance of showing signs of cognitive impairment between the ages of 65 to 79. So the point is, the older your parents are without this disease, the more likelihood that it's not going to come into your life until you're up in ages, okay? Mom developed it around age 86. My dad lived to age 92. So we're hoping, I tell people I have part-timers. Sometimes just aging, we forget a few things. But hopefully that's the case. Now, any questions about that or anything else before we continue? And I want to get these handouts to those who just came in.
Some of those statistics, are those just like in America, or is that like a world?
In America. Yeah, in America. I haven't gone to the world part because I guess that wouldn't relate to us as much, if you know what I mean. But yes, those are in America. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Is it more family related or what you eat?
Part of it, hey there.
Thank you.
Part of it may relate to what you eat, lifestyle, your sleep habits, your exercise. All of those things can be added into it. I enjoy this. Eat more chocolate, dark chocolate. 72% CaCao is the best stuff, they say. Or if you get to 80, it's almost like whatever, but it's not chocolate. But the point is, the darker the chocolate, the more helpful it's been in regards to that. So that's something that goes along with it. Yes, Robert?
I've had several brain surgeries. Would that contribute?
I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't answer that. I don't know. I'm really not sure on that one. I would think the possibility might persist because surgeries can add to it and whatever. Hospital stays for dementia people really do a number on them, and a lot of sundowning. By sundowning, I'm talking about the patient is sleeping in the afternoon and then awake all night long and really hard or whatever. I did a webinar just last week on this, and they were saying that a lot of sundowning takes place when patients go into the hospitals. Well, why? Well, because the environment's completely different. They don't know them. They know them as a patient, but they don't know their likes and dislikes and whatever. And so they're unfamiliar with that situation. And like I said, some people who never had those problems do that in the hospital, and then they come home with that, and you've got to try to work around it. One of the things they said was, don't let them nap during the day. And at 2 to 3 o'clock, when that begins to kick in, and whatever, have an exercise, or go for a walk, or take them in a car, or bring in additional personnel to help socialize with them. Anything to keep them on that clock that you're on so that they can sleep at night just like you are. And so those things can be helpful. Any other questions before we continue on? Yes, sir.
Two-part question. When you talk about dementia, are you putting Alzheimer's in that bubble of
Right.
dementia? Okay.
I came up with this concept. If dementia is the last name, Alzheimer's is the firstborn son, because over 60% of the dementias are Alzheimer's. It's more so than all the other ones. And it deals with the short-term memory, as we're talking about as well. So yes, we'll talk about that, and we'll see some pictures here of some diseased brains in just a moment. Yes?
You also indicated that if you're Cherokee Indian, you only have 12% chance of dementia, but is that compared to the 13% of individuals over 65?
Well, yeah,
That's only-
yeah, right, yeah, definitely. And that number has just increased. I mean, in 2012, it was like 1 out of 12. Well, now we're down to 1 out of 8. Because one reason is we know more, and so what we may have said, years ago, they had it, we just didn't know the names up for it as well. Now we know a lot more testing about it, but it is getting worse, if you know what I mean. Alzheimer's, 2/3 of those who have it are women. Who are the caregivers typically for dementia patients? Women. That's interesting, isn't it? And yet, there are various factors on that. Again, you can do some research on that. Part of it has to do with the hormones of a woman versus the hormones of a man. But there's a lot of things that go along with that. Okay, number 4. With Alzheimer's, short-term memory is often affected before long-term memory. Very true. Very true. Now, short-term memory is anything from 15 to 30 seconds. And so they've gone, in other words, you tell somebody your name typically, and then they have time to pull that up. Would you run that back to her? Hey there. Thank you. And so it is that way. It's the hippocampus right up here in the front. A lot of times they can remember the things that happened 30, 40 years ago. But because that portion of the brain, which is in the back, is preserved. But right up front, that's what it is. Number 5, the caregiver needs to feed the Alzheimer's patient, since aspiration can occur if they do not. There may be a time where you're going to need to do so, but there's 3 times more the chance of them choking as opposed to them feeding themselves. And I suggest to people, and again, you're there and the patients, everybody's different, but give them time to feed themselves if at all possible. Eat with them. Put food on brightly colored plates. There's something about the color red. I'm from Alabama, Roll Tide. But you're Ohio State, so the Ohio State's not too far away, so they're red, all kinds of red. But there's something about red plates, something that just sort of jumps out at them. And anything that you can do to help them eat, right? And so that's something to keep that in mind. They may desire to eat more. Number 6, head trauma is a leading cause for dementia among young adults. Very true. In 2020, there were 2.8 million emergency room visits for possible traumatic brain injury. Now, 80% of them turned out to be mild concussion type situations. But, and among women, typically the rates are very low in regards to, because, they don't play tackle football like others do and whatever. I did a study of, it was a webinar of a fella, and he was really into all this type thing. He was a, doctor, professional. And he said, I get the question, people ask me, should my son play football? He said, studies have shown that if they wait till the age of 14 to begin to play sports that involve tackling or whatever the case may be, that through high school typically does not hurt the brain in any way. That when you go to the next level in college or pros, then it's more an issue. But he said 14 was the thing. Among teenagers, every 20 seconds, a traumatic brain injury occurs somewhere in America. This can include headache, confusion, blurred vision, and memory loss. 9.5% of all the dementias can be attributed among young people to one head injury. And so that's something to keep in mind. Number 7, 13% of people ages 65 and older develop Alzheimer's disease. That's true. Every 68 seconds, someone in America is developing Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form. It's estimated by the year 2060, there'll be 13.8 million people in America. Right now, it's right at 7 million that has Alzheimer's, just that part of it. But by 2060, every 33 seconds, someone will be developing Alzheimer's disease. And so, that's something we have to keep in mind. Number 8, with dementia, there is a direct connection to the loss of neurons in the brain. Very true. These neurons are like nerve cells, computer chips within the brain. They send brain signals to each other, and dementia will short circuit them so that they cannot work together. Some say that we have as many as 100 billion nerve cells within our brain, but as we get older, in our late 40s, early 50s, we lose one every second. Now, do the math, that's 86,400 a day, but you've got so many in there, 13 billion. Do the math, and you're gonna have to get close to 100 before you really begin to worry about it in that regard. When Alzheimer's destroys these cells, they cannot be reproduced, and that tau, that protein, often is in there clogging them up. Number 9, feeding tubes can be a great aid to an Alzheimer's patient, adding weight, nutritional balance to their body. First of all, let me say I'm not a doctor, but this is, for the most part, false, because think about it. To put in a feeding tube is a surgery. That means going to the hospital. It can fall out and has to be put back in. It doesn't risk pneumonia. Sometimes there's a lot of swelling due to the surgery. Sometimes the person will spit up the food coming in through the feeding tube. Now that's all the negative side. Again, that may be the best thing for your loved ones, and that can add value and life and all those things. So just understand the complications, but it's not something that you necessarily choose to do. Also, it takes away the human contact of feeding. You, them, helping them, and tasting favorite foods. Sadly, toward the end of the Alzheimer's journey, part of the brain that recognizes hunger stops working so that a person does not feel that they're starving. And so that sometimes happens. And then this one's interesting. Dr. Hutchings, the neurologist from Boston, said this. To an Alzheimer's patient, a black rubber mat is often perceived as a hole and they will not step on it. True. He had a unit there in Boston where there was a lady that was leaving the unit to go to the 7-Eleven, which was right behind the place. Even at 11 o'clock at night, whenever, basically everybody is down, she was somehow getting away. They couldn't figure it out. And she was just going over there to buy cigarettes, of all things, That's not the best connection, is it? And so somebody said, well, let's just put one of those big black rubber mats right in front of it. That stopped it. I've had 2 people in the last year say, hey, I remember you talking about that, and we tried it, and it did exactly what we thought it would do. It stopped them because even though they can see, their depth perception has left them. And so they're not seeing how big that hole is, and the end result is they stop. And so whatever works, right, in that regard. And so that can be helpful in that manner. The facts and figures that you see before you, I believe on one of the other page, 6.9, now it's up to 7 million as of August of this year, are dealing with this. Here's something in case you never remember anything else I say. Dementia is a disease of the brain. It is not a disease of the soul. We need to understand that. It's not that they're being mean or ornery or whatever. It's a disease of the brain. Now, you may know that person. You say, well, 40% of it is, that's up to you, But point is, they can't help that they can't remember. I remember us sitting there in UAB talking to the nurse practitioner, and she looked at my 86-year-old daddy and 2 big, boys and said, stop saying remember. She cannot remember, and all you're doing is aggravating her, and it's going to come back to haunt you. Leave it alone. Take that word out of your vocabulary. And she's right. She's right. 120,000 people die each year because of Alzheimer's. It's the 6th leading cause of death among people. And we've already talked about this. Almost 50% of those 85 have dementia. Every hour in America, 330 people turn the age of 65. That's 8,000 people a day. It's been estimated by the year 2030, not too far from now, 1 out of 4 Americans will be 65 or older. Now think about that in regards to the church, this congregation here. How many people do you have 65 or older? Well, 13% of them are on the path with dementia. You have folks 85 and over, almost half of them have it. And so we need to think about ministering to them, and particularly in the lessons tomorrow, we'll be talking about those. 2/3 of the folks who have Alzheimer's are women. Yet 60% of those with dementia caregivers are women. Dementia comes from a Latin word literally meaning out of mind. It's the permanent loss of multiple intellectual functions. It's like a computer where the hard drive has crashed. The memories are there, but they just can't be pulled up. What does that include? You've got that handout there in front of you. Loss of memory. You've seen that contorted face where they're trying to pull up something, and you see the files going up there, but you just can't pull up the whole thing. Problems with speech and understanding. Especially if you're going to visit somebody that may not be your relative or whatever, but you ask them that question. Sister so, do you know who I am? Heard about this lady in a nursing home where one of the elders had gone up to visit this lady in the nursing home. And of course, she was in her wheelchair and she was sitting in the commons area. And he walked up to her and he said, Sister Ethel, do you know who I am? And she said, no, but if you'll see that lady in the white dress, she'll tell you who you are. We got to laugh some, right? We're going to cry, so we need to laugh when we can. But that question, do you know who I am? It's going to take them 7 seconds in the throes of dementia to process what it was that you asked and if they know the answer. And it's maybe on the tip of their tongue, but that goes along with it. Changes in personality and behavior. Typically, they become either bitter or better, or sometimes in between. So then we can become hostile. You ever known someone who is the best of Christians begin to curse? You think, well, why? And somebody will say, well, you know, in their latter days, they're just going to fall back to... No. The inhibitory circuits, the right portion of the brain, have been destroyed because of the cell brain damage. And thus there's no governor, if you will, to hold them back from saying or doing improper things that they'd otherwise do. It's the disease talking. It's not the person. And we need to keep that in mind. And then as it continues, the increased reliance on others for those activities of ADL, of daily living. Let's look at some pictures. You see the normal brain on the left, and you see the Alzheimer brain on the right, the shrinkage of it. And with that is amnesia, the loss of memory functions. And again, you see on the right, or my right at least, the normal slices of the brain. You see the decay on the other and how it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and finally you see the end. Those are real pictures, my friends. And with amnesia in the early stages, they forget little details. They misplace things. They write notes as reminders. They realize they have memory problems and try to cover them up. My mother-in-law, Miss Tommy, somebody would ask her a question, and she couldn't know the answer, but she'd say, well, John, tell them what they're asking. You know, she'd call on her husband to do it. In the middle stages, they forget phone calls, locations of the purses, medications, hundreds of daily details. They forget the past. They forget that they cannot remember. And they argue about it. They need help with financial items. My mother-in-law had paid the bills. That was just the way they had done it. And toward the end, as it would really begin to get worse, they would eventually call and talk to my father-in-law, and he'd say, well, he said, I don't know what happened, but Miss Tommy paid the light bill twice, but the water bill hadn't been paid in 2 months. Well, he eventually had to take it over himself because there's just no way that she could do that. In the final stages of amnesia, they forget recent or past events, and at the end, they just stare, and that's all. And yes, ma'am.
Does Parkinson's have any impact on memory?
It can be a possibility, and it's going to be a part of another type of dementia that we're going to talk about in just a moment. But yes, it can. It doesn't have to, but sometimes it can contribute to the possibility of it. I guess you could do more research on the likelihood of a person having Parkinson's that's going to have dementia. I don't know what those figures would be, but I do know in that magazine that we passed around that there's some information about that, and that's why I suggest that you get that in that manner. Aphasia is the ability to understand the spoken or written word. Again, it's time for you to go to the bathroom. It's going to take 72% longer for them to think, okay, what do they want me to do? What does bathroom mean? They hear the words, but they sometimes may even say it out loud again to themselves because they're trying to understand the process of what you're saying. And you see that unspoken word. Primary progressive aphasia is no ability to reason. They cannot speak or even understand language. And then there's, again, you see the pictures, apraxia. Apraxia is the loss of ability to perform remembered motor tasks. Putting on clothes, taking off clothes. My mother-in-law, we began to think about it toward the end of her journey when she ended up finally in the nursing home before then, or at the end. But she'd wear the same clothes over and over again. She'd come to our house and wear the same clothes. And we don't know if it was because she forgot how to put the other ones on or these were comfortable. But hey, ride with it. If you find something that they like, buy 4 or 5 pair of them. I mean, Make it easy on them and easy on them because typically they say, and you do need to give them choices, but you need to show them, Mom, would you like to wear this or would you like to wear this? Give them two choices because they may want to pull up something that they can't wear anymore, but give them choices. But sometimes buttoning a shirt, bathing, shaving, even how to use the bathroom, apraxia works that way. And then agnosia, the inability to recognize what things look like or feel like or who someone is. Alzheimer's kills brain cells that recognize but spare brain cells for vision. They can see, but they just can't comprehend what they're seeing. And sometimes they're seeing things that aren't there. And then also the appetite and sleep, sundowning. You can see the hole there caused in that brain because of it. Alzheimer's is the most common form of the dementia, 60 to 70%. There's now over 100 different kinds of dementia. And as we continue to evolve in this world, there's going to be more and more. Lewy body dementia is where Parkinson's is a part of it. Lewy body dementia happens more in men than in women. And there's difficulty in solving problems. Robin Williams had this illness. Vascular dementia is the second most common form of dementia. Men tend to have it more than women do. There's a lot of intellectual losses, up and down situations. Strokes can be a part of this kind. There's a lot of mood swings in vascular dementia. It's a little bit more progressive, typically 3 to 4 years. A person's lifestyle is, life length is in regards to that. Had a preacher friend of mine tell me, did any of you go to Polishing the Pulpit down in Sevierville, Tennessee, Brantford? Y'all heard about Polishing the Pulpit? A lot of really, really good place. They do it in Branson, Missouri now in July, and also the one that I typically go to there in Pigeon Forge area. But there, a preacher friend of mine was telling me that they had to put his father into a facility because he said one time he got in one of these mood swings, having vascular dementia, and was so angry that he kicked the hospital bed and broke it. He was in the hospital for something else, and they said, he's going to be going back home. What if he has an anger issue like this and takes it out on our mom and his wife? And so they eventually had to put him in because of that case. Frontotemporal dementia, only 1 to 2% have that. It's extremely progressive. There's younger people more involved with this. Social and language people, they're out of control. Bad language, inappropriate social behavior. Narrow vision, pulling the hair is typical with folks who have frontotemporal dementia. And so those, and there are other forms, but those are the more common forms. Yes, ma'am?
Now, this is my understanding. Alzheimer's is the plaque, right? The plaque that's growing in the brain.
Right, the tau, the protein,
Right.
yes.
And vascular,
Amyloid.
yeah, and vascular is where they're just not getting enough
Blood to the,
circulation.
right. It can be strokes that cause the constriction of blood to the brain, which causes the anger
Right.
or acting out, this mood swings.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How about if untreated AFib? Will that do it?
What now?
Untreated AFib.
Yes.
I would think so. Not a doctor, but I would think so because that's going to be constriction as well.
Okay.
But
Yeah, we have a stubborn mother.
that's a good question for those social workers, on the 866 number. But yeah, and your neurologists or there's now another one, neuropsychologists, neuropsychiatrists. Those are some of the newer names for the world of this. Now we've talked about this from a technical term. We're going to take a break here in about 3 or 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about the world of the caregiver. But before I do so, let me mention something to you. We'll do the handouts up here in just a moment. Here's also some available resources, extra ones if you'd like to take this. This is something that we did for my mom. My wife came up with this, and I'll always be appreciative of that. But she said, let's put together a memory book for your mom. She's in her 5th year of this disease. And we want people to remember her for who she is and what she did in her life. And so I wish I could, we had to fly, so I couldn't bring her actual book. But you can take pictures of this book of what you need to do to get started and the different things that we did in here. And on the first page, the basic facts about her life. She was a church secretary. She was a physical therapist aide. She was a missionary in Russia with my dad, all kinds of things. She's grandmama. She drove very fast, all those things, And then we had people write letters about who she was, and we had pictures of all the family, all the kids, even the grandkids, the great-grandkids, drew little finger things, or whatever. And then we talked about the difference that she made in her life. 3 days before she died in the hospital, she's looking at this book as if it was the first time that she'd ever seen it. Because she'd forget where it come from. And so every so often, my dad would hand it to her, or when we were there, we'd hand it to her, and she said, who put this together? And then we'd tell them, wow, this is amazing. It was like she was seeing her life all over again. First of all, it occupied time. Secondly, it gave her nurturing, helped her to realize what she did in life. I already told you I'm a better minister because of my mom. On Saturdays, she'd be cooking fried chicken, and then she'd say, boys, and I think, we're going to eat this tomorrow. Take this down to the projects, to the widows that are there. We just learned. She was always giving to people. And those are the things, we'd have people write letters about her and things that she'd made in her life. So feel free to take pictures of that if you'd like to, and I wanted to tell you that in advance. But now let's end this break, sadly, with the trauma of Alzheimer's. Trauma suggests the idea of the blunt force. It causes pain to the body or causes trauma to the mind because of dementia. 2009, a phone call comes to us. Honey, will you please talk to your mother? She thought the soap was out of her hair as she washed it in the sink. It wasn't, and I went to help her. She hit at me and fell backwards and hit the ground. Now she thinks I pushed her and I meant to do it. I'm afraid she'll tell others that I pushed her. Trauma, the roles have changed. The parent becomes the child becomes the parent. The wife becomes the caregiver and the dominant force, and the husband succumbs to hopefully meekly attempt to do what the wife tells him to do. September 9th, 2022. She wants to take her medicine, but I tell her it's not time. She gets so mad she falls to the ground and starts yelling. 20 minutes later, she doesn't even remember doing it. Trauma, do you remember when the meekest man on earth becomes combative? Or the sweetest woman on earth begins to curse you like a drunken sailor? Or the most religious person you ever knew gives you looks that could kill and tells you to leave them alone? A husband of 42 years of marriage tells this horror story. My wife had regularly colored her hair in an attempt to preserve something that would be familiar to her. I did it for her. One time she became combative, would not allow me to rinse out the color. As it began to burn her scalp, she became more agitated and screamed in pain. She would not allow me to remove the color, and there was no one there to help me. I hit her in an attempt to shock her into submission. I was not lashing out at her or abusing her, but at the end, both of us were sobbing and heartbroken. I had not only lost her, but also myself along the way. Who am I is a real question that caregivers ask themselves over and over again. July the 10th, 2010. I come to the nursing home. My wife is sitting there in the foyer and some man has his hand in her lap. That happened to my father-in-law and he lost it and told them in no uncertain terms that was never going to happen again. Again. Trauma. The last one, September 10th, 2010. Will you tell my husband I'm here? She says. If he knew I was here, he would come and get me. She says those words to her husband of 56 years. Remember when you sent out the first birthday card to a friend or family member and you signed your name only? That's part of the trauma. Well, thank you so much for being here. The next one we'll talk about will be the world of the caregiver. But let's take about a 10-minute break, and then we will come back and we will continue. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, anybody else need any more time? Everything good? Okay, I'm going to go back to it, and you can grade yourself. How many did you get right? Count the ones you got right. You don't have to tell us, but just know the number that you got right of those 15. Yes, sir.
Is this really a fair test? Just as an example, as I look at this list, there's things on here that I would never buy as a grocery list.
I understand, and this was a standard test that I got somewhere else. I guess they're just making your mind evolve by thinking about, like you said, you've been thinking, and sandwiches, bread, mustard, mayonnaise, ham, turkey, cheese,
But you notice it's all food.
They're all
So
food.
the one I
this is a
did the
grocery
other day was
Yeah.
all about snow. And
Yours,
anything
when-
related to
When
what
you had related to
one
snow,
I-
yeah, so this is just one, I'm sure there's many of them out there. This is just one that I saw or whatever, so, yeah, it may not, you're exactly right. It may not be, because if you're not into food, that some of these things might not be, whatever. Okay, so add up how many you got right, and then here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna tell you the age bracket and what they said based upon your age, the number that you should have gotten right, whoever they are. If you're between the ages of 18 to 39, you should be able to recall 10 to 15 of them. If you're between the ages of 40 to 49, then they say you should be able to remember 9 of them. If you're between 50 and 59, then you should be able to remember 9 of the answers. If you're 60 to 69, you should be able to remember 8. And if you're 70 or older, you should be able to remember 7. So, I hope you did great, or whatever the case may be. But anyway, I hope, yes ma'am.
I have a question.
What?
Do you think that technology has made a difference? And I'll tell you why. I don't remember my grocery list. I just put it in my phone, and then I just add to it as I go along. So I don't have to remember things like that anymore.
That's a good point. And my wife does the same thing. She sends me, she sends it to me on my phone. I'm going to buy the groceries. I said, I want it written down. I like to see it myself, But technology may have taken a hit in our brain because we rely on it very much. Very true, very true, very true. We're going to talk about dementia and the idea of the caregiver itself. Let's imagine that today I say to you, we're looking for caregivers. People who are willing to donate a part of their life to taking care of someone that they may know intimately well, or someone that they may be somewhat abstractly related to. But in order to do that, here are the qualifications. First of all, you have to give up at least 6 years of your life doing this. You can't choose which 6 years they are. During this time, you're going to experience fatigue, tragedies and triumphs, perils, heartaches and laughter, tears and a multiplicity of fears. By doing this work, you're going to stand a double chance of developing clinical depression. You will most likely lose some family members along the way of this journey, and at least some of your friends. If you're married, this career is going to tax your marriage and perhaps even your love life. Your health will probably get worse and will take its toll on you financially, mentally, physically, and possibly even spiritually. Your relationship with your loved one may deteriorate to the point that they do not even know you, lie about you, be mean to you, or say ugly things about you. How many of you are willing to sign this? The fact is, that's what exactly you're doing. That's exactly who you are. And you've already signed on for life, haven't you? Yes, ma'am.
You've already done that when you said I do, but you had no idea what it means.
That's true. That's true. But the preacher says for better or for worse. Those are words. But a lot of times you're exactly right. Well, you can appreciate all those things that we've just talked about, and you're already doing that. Some of the facts and figures. Alzheimer's affects 7.1 million adults in America. And some of the notables of the disease of dementia include Floyd Patterson, Coach Pat Summit of the Tennessee Volunteers, Bobby V, the singer, Glenn Campbell, Jimmy Stewart, Charlton Heston, Rita Hayworth, Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Etta James, Charles Bronson, Dear Abby, Abigail Van Buren. More recently, President Ronald Reagan, Sugar Ray Robinson, Robin Williams, and even now Bruce Willis. But the facts are that there are over 10 million family members that take care of Alzheimer's patients. There are some 34 million caregivers that give 21 hours a week to care for their loved ones. Family members provide 70% of the Alzheimer's care. 55% of them are spouses. 35% of the caregivers for Alzheimer's are adult children, normally daughters and daughters-in-law. 5% are other relatives or paid caregivers. Women provide 75% of them. The average care that they're going to give a week is 50 to 70 hours. Caregivers give an average of 70 hours a week. Those who even work outside the home give 40 hours a week in caregiving. Now, there has been an increase of men who become caregivers because 2/3 of those who suffer with Alzheimer's are women. So somebody's got to take care of them. Maybe daughters, it may be other ladies. But the number of men who became primary caregivers rose from 19% in 1997 to 40% in 2012. I would say that's been even a lot higher now. Those are just old figures there. Women are at greater risk of developing Alzheimer's, while men are at greater risk of developing vascular dementia. And half of the caregivers live with the patient. Now, what's the issues with that? Why would that be a greater concern? That half of the caregivers live on a regular basis with the patient. Yes?
Because you become a 24-hour nurse.
Right. Even if you bring people in from outside, if you're in the home and something's happening to Charlie, guess who they're going to come to? Even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't get him to sleep. You know. Yeah, exactly right. And you feel it even if you leave the house. You still feel, I got to have a phone with me. I've got, and you can't relax completely because you're thinking, is it worth this because of so-and-so? Those things enter into it. 70% of caregivers are reluctant to leave their loved ones for brief periods of time. What are some other challenges that caregivers have, whether they live in the same building with the patient or not? What are some other challenges? Some of you are there and you know what I'm talking about. Yes?
It really is a lesson in patience. You know how the Bible talks about tribulation brings patience. And it is a great tribulation, and it does teach you patience, but sometimes when you're just so worn out, it's so hard to be patient. Like I told you about the saying,
Yes, ma'am.
they're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time.
Yeah,
But then you're having a hard time too. And you need relief.
because that's your flesh and blood in terms of that's your mate that you gave your body and your life and your mind and your spirit to.
And people tell you, well, you got to take care of yourself if you can't take care of him. You cannot in the middle of a storm. Those are nice thoughts. But the reality is, you can't.
Yes, ma'am. You raised your hand now.
Oh, okay, yes, I did, I probably forgot already.
That's okay. Yes.
You're in the right place.
We'll all go to the unit after this. She knows what it is.
What she said is that if you're spending all your time taking care of a loved one with dementia, you can't take care of yourself, like you can't rest and relax and things like that. You know.
On the plane,
If
you
you
know,
have health issues yourself, how can you deal with
yeah.
it?
Flying over here now, Delta at least, I don't know if the others do or not, but instead of them actually going through the procedure that you need to know, there's a video that you can watch. You know, I saw it the first time and, you know, da-da-da-da. But, you know, in case of the emergency, the mask comes down, and what do they tell you about that mask? Put yours on before you help somebody else. And there's something to be said for that. That's easier said than done. Because in the moment, you're all about, I've got to get them out of this emergency, or out of this, or if I don't do this, they could die. I mean, you know, it's well and good, but it's really hard to do that. And isn't it also true that when you're trying to do some things for yourself, there's a guilt that you're feeling? And I've heard people, I was reading something just yesterday about this, one of the webinars I did, and they were just saying, sometimes the reason that caregivers don't do too well is because they're living with that guilt of, I'm able to take this trip, or I'm able to go to the grocery store, or I'm able to go to the gym for, you know, an hour a day, and they can't, and I feel so guilty that you don't do it, which then hurts yourself because you're not taking care. Or I'd love to take this nap, but he can't do that. Well, again, there's that guilt that you have to work with. Somebody else raised the hand over here.
I did, well, my late husband had dementia for 5 years. The hardest thing I found was making all the decisions about his care. Everything, yeah. I mean, there came a time when I had to put him in a nursing home, and I hated that. Well, I ended up pulling him out because the nursing home was terrible, but that was the biggest part, was just the decisions. All, you know, you're
It's
making
overwhelming.
It is. It's
Yeah.
just, oh
Yeah.
my word, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, what am I supposed to do?
Miss Nancy mentioned to me that she recently moved. That was such a big decision. First of all, to sell the home, and then secondly, all the things that go along with that. You don't just up and do it. I mean, you know, you've got to work through it. I told my wife, I said, this is the second and last home that we were building. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want, in latter years, because it was hard enough, you know, just thinking about that, and we're, you know, generally good health. But yeah, it really is something. Yes, ma'am.
I think part of the things that you don't realize are happening is your relationship changes because the person you knew isn't that person anymore per se, because some of the things, I'm talking about my mom, and smartest person I ever met, self-made, amazing. And now she's asking me questions like, well, what should I wear today? Well, I don't care, just get dressed. I mean, you know, it's just things like that, and it's like, wait, why are you asking me this? Or yesterday it was like, well, how am I going to get in the door? Okay, well, I'm getting the stuff out of the car, so I'm going to unlock the door. Well, where are my keys? Okay, well, you don't need your keys because I'm standing here in front. And I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, patience.
It's hard to say that, and when they ask the same question over and over again.
Yeah.
Number 9 is fine, but when they get to 11, it just snaps.
Yes, ma'am.
I think the level of frustration a person experiences and feeling inadequate, ill-equipped to do what is needed to do can be very overwhelming.
And a lot of times you're learning as you go. And it's different every day. Very true. Well, y'all, you certainly know what the throes of it are because my mom, the last week of her life, her mitral valve had played out and she was only at 40% capacity. And the doctor at age 85 for her just said, I would not put my mother under that kind of surgery. It's major surgery. And he said, I just think, and Mom would ask the doctor, who was a member of the church with them, where they worshiped, doctor, what should I do? She said, well, just love your family all you can. And that was Monday, and she passed away in her sleep Saturday morning. So in terms of all kinds of other issues, she didn't have, she'd forget, and she'd have some sundowning, and sometimes Dad would call and just say, talk to your mother. And I knew that that was something, he wouldn't think get on to her, he'd just say, talk whatever, the family or whatever, because, it was sort of getting a little harder and whatever. But those things, it wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. Yes, sir.
Well, the physical part of it too, like when we had to take care of my wife's mom and dad, he had Parkinson's. They had enough to deal with mentally and all that kind of stuff, but boy, physical. You just can't pick up a body and move them and wash them and clean them. That is tough stuff.
Yes.
And we did that for years with him.
And sometimes
That'll kill you.
with vascular dementia, they get even more resistant to that. I knew a lady who was very smart, and yet she got vascular dementia, and she had 3 daughters, and she played hardball with them in regards to even taking baths, because she just said, I'm not going to do it, you can't make me, that type of thing, She'd always been the one making the decisions. And so Amy, the one that I knew, which used to be one of our church secretaries when I was the minister there, they lived in Florida. Her mother lived in Florida. And she said, Mom, don't you like to go to the beach? She said, yeah. Well, let's go to the beach. Well, okay, let's do that. He said, well, you're going to have to change now in order to go to the beach. She said, well, okay. So she went and got her bathing suit on. Amy got her bathing suit on. Then they went into the shower, and she let her take her bath, give her a bath. So sometimes you got to play the game. And that's exactly what they did, and it worked. They were at the beach, and she was happy with it. You got to do what you got to do. Yes, sir.
Developing a martyrs complex is also a difficult.
Developing what now?
The martyrs complex.
Murder complex.
Martyr.
Martyr.
I'm sacrificing.
That's really a good hear, bud. That was martyr complex, not murder complex. They're taping this.
Yeah. But the martyrs complex of sacrificing of yourself to care for, and therefore the rest of the family owes me for this, and God owes me for this, and all
wow,
that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I went to write that down. Yes, you're exactly right, because that is, you're doing all that you can do because you love them, and yes, ma'am. You were going to say?
Well, I just think that people need to be taught how to create a good support system around them when these things happen.
Can you repeat? And we can't hear her.
Oh,
A good support system is needed, and I'm going to give you a
And I'm
long
not-
list of things that can be done to help with that.
yeah,
And that's where the church and others come in.
right. Because I'm not sure that that is out there for people to, that's being taught as well as it probably should be.
Somebody gave a list of 25 different things that people can do that can play a role in the life of the dementia family. And it's really, really important.
And you've got to realize too that even when you're the caregiver, you're going to have people in your family that are not going to want to have any part of this. And that's going to change the family dynamics. And it's very difficult.
Or you're going to have a brother or sister that's considered a seagull child that fly in once a year to take care of mom. I guess I can do it for a week. You know, you've been doing it the other 51. Well, y'all go on vacation, have a good time if you can, while I'm sitting here taking care of mama. And guess what happens? They change the routine, they change the diet, they change everything. And then they can't wait for you to get back on Sunday night so that they can get back to their neatly packaged life. And then guess what they leave behind for you to clean up? All the mess. They're called seagull. I'll let you name them, whoever they are in your family. But they're seagull children or seagull whatevers. And that's really not really the right way it needs to be. Yes, ma'am.
I have found, my husband had dementia. And I have found that close friends got come around.
Close friends.
He kept saying, you know, where is so-and-so?
Yeah.
They never came around.
And a lot of times I've heard people say, well, I just want to remember them the way they are, the way they used to be, not the way they are. But think about that. Because you can't handle their disease, they lose your friendship. That just doesn't sound right. That's not even Christian.
No,
but that happens.
I think they couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And it was what I'm thinking, but.
Very true, very true. Somebody else had a hand over here.
How do you deal, being a caregiver, we find this, how do you deal with that stubbornness of the care? I mean, we've got the most stubbornest mother in the world. She thinks she won't even take her heart medicine for her dementia. I mean, her AFib.
That's hard to do.
And
one of the key words they say is let's. Mama, let's, and then talk about, let's take a walk. Let's do this. Let's bribe them. Mama, let's take this medicine and then we'll have ice cream right after it.
okay.
Something that they enjoy doing. Or we'll go, whatever. But try it. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it might work. You might find out. But yeah, that's a lot of prayer too, if you know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, definitely. It is harder. Alzheimer's has been called a long goodbye or a living funeral because there's three kinds of losses. There's the loss of the future in terms of the things that they could or could not do. There's the loss of the present, the things that they can't do any longer. You know, with men, when they have to ask for assistance to go to the restroom, that's a loss for them. But sometimes it just has to be in some cases. Or if you're the son taking care of the mother, there's some times where Mama, we got to take care of you. We got to clean you up, and hey, we'll be as fragile as we need to, but we need to take care of that. There's just sometimes those things happen. It happened one time with my mom, and we dealt with it as best we could. I was the only one there, so I had to help, if you know what I mean. And then the loss of the past. Sometimes they can remember the past, especially with Alzheimer's, but they begin to misconstrue the facts and whatever. Well, what are some of the losses? The loss of social interaction, as you just said, support from friends and family. And sometimes friends and family, or perhaps they wonder, well, why don't you bring so-and-so to church? Or why don't you bring them to the family get-togethers? What they don't realize is that 1 out of 4 are hearing voices and sounds that aren't there because the auditory hallucinations, and that can certainly be an issue. I knew of a situation where there was a relative down in Alabama, and they were talking about this uncle, and there were folks, okay, I have to tell the truth, from Michigan that were saying, well, Uncle so-and-so, we talk to him on the phone all the time, and we don't understand why you're saying there's all these issues and whatever. Well, then they came down from Michigan to visit that uncle in Florence, Alabama, and while he was there, he bit one of them. And they changed their tune in a hurry. you know, that's a long, long way, but, you know, these folks were living with him every day, and they're saying, Uncle so-and-so ain't like he used to be. And they learned that the hard way. Dementia is the death or permanent dysfunction of nerve cells of the brain. And we've got to know that they see things or hear things that sometimes 1 out of 4 that, you know, aren't there. A daughter was staying with a mom, and the mom wasn't going to go to bed because she said there were all kinds of people in the house. And she knew it was just the 2 of them. And so she called her mentor that had helped her in all this and said, I don't know what to do. It's 11 o'clock at night. Mom won't go to bed because she said there's a party going on here in the house. And she said, you know they're not there, but she does it. She said, go to the door of the house and say, thank you all for coming, but it's time for you to leave, and then open the door. She did, and the mama went to bed. You just do what you got to do in that regard. They see things that don't exist. Alzheimer's spares vision nerve cells, but damage nerve cells that interpret vision. They see things that are not there. Animals, dead relatives, strangers, and other disturbing things. It's important that you let them especially be careful what they watch in regards to TV, especially at nighttime. You're watching TV shows that show murders or bad accidents or violence. That's not good for them when they're going to bed. And so you need to be careful about the things that they watch. And this is the patient, but this is on you because of you're the one that's having to deal with the issues where they see things. Arguing with them does not help. And then you see the brain there. 1 out of 3 will develop false beliefs. And they will accuse things. Lisa's grandmother, my wife's grandmother, was one day with her Alzheimer's packing her suitcase. And they said, Mama, what are you doing? Well, Pawpaw has brought another woman into this house, and I ain't going to stand for it. I'm just leaving. I said, Mama, what are you talking about? That woman's back there in our bedroom, and I'm not going to stay. So they walked back to the bedroom and said, where is she? She pointed to the mirror, and she said, there she is. She was looking at herself. She did not recognize herself anymore. She thought, Pawpaw, I brought another woman into the house, and it was her. That's what you deal with. And those things are happening. I knew about a lady that gave a monetary gift financially to the church, and then a couple of years later, when she had dementia, said that the church had stolen the money from her. Those things. Another mother thought the husband had a new lover, and it was their daughter that was there providing the care for her.
So you said arguing with them doesn't resolve this, which I agree. How do you suggest you handle those kind of situations?
Redirect as best as you can. Change the subject. Come up with something completely different. Mom, what kind of food did you say you like to eat? Change the subject. You know, I want to go home. Mom, can you tell me about your home? What room in the house did you like the best? That's what they're thinking about. And then well, I want to go home. Well, was your home made of brick, or was it mortar, or was it? And what kind of flowers did you have in your home? Just try to live in their world. Change the subject.
You have to divert their mind.
Divert their mind.
All the time. And, it's interesting, vision, because I watch somebody in the church a few days a week, and she'll go, and when we're watching TV, she'll grab at the screen, just trying to, if there's flowers or something, or, just whatever, and she sees things. Or you go and you give her, say, a bowl of fruit, and you'll hand it to her, but she doesn't see it. You've got to put her hands on it. you know, and then she will, I don't even know if she sees it, you know, but she'll, you know, just from the feel of it, you know, then she'll start eating and that, but it's just really, and she's probably further, you know, through this than, you know, what you're talking about here. But still, she functions great, but you know, it's still always diverting her, you know, her attention, her mind.
Right.
You know.
Are y'all familiar with fidget blankets? A fidget blanket is a piece of cloth that has all little things that are tied to it that cannot come off, that won't get in their mouth, but something that in the latter stages of dementia, they just need to occupy their time. And so you can make those accordingly. Some people call them busy boxes, and it can actually be a box of things. Let's say that this was a man that was a mechanic. You can buy plastic tools and put them in that box, and little things that they can't put in their mouth that hurt, but something that they might occupy their time. Fidget blankets that have, you know, little, I wish I'd have brought one, but have all kinds of things on them, strings that again can't come off, or keys that they can just touch. Or my mother-in-law would look at my wife's calendar for an hour at a time. Well, that was just something she'd flip the page and look at what she had written in here, and you know, and she might even say, you know, Tanya, you know, talking about her birthday because that's the date and whatever. But just a calendar book. But that gave her some peace, if you will. That's what you're trying to do in that manner. Sundowning, you can see there the diseased brain. Typically around 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when that kicks in. And so again, you want to try to give them something to do in that manner. Also, losses that caregivers face is the lack of closure and the completion of unfinished business. One lady put it this way: I never knew how bad Mom was, and by the time I did, it was too late to tell her how much she meant to me and what a really good mother she had been to us kids. Her last memories probably of me yelling at her to stop asking me what time it was. Well, again, that's just real, but sometimes those things can go into it. And then face the loss of one's own health. I mean, the studies are that there's the risk of clinical depression up to 50% for caregivers, twice as likely to have clinical depression than someone who's not caring for an Alzheimer's patient. And 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients rate their emotional stress as high or very high. As many as 50% have depression problems, but only 10% seek help. Again, it's easy to say, you know, put your mask on before others, but it's really hard to do that. Another loss is that institutional decision. One lady said, if I were a good daughter, I'd be able to take care of Mom at home. She always took care of me when things got rough. She just didn't send me away. The least I can do is to give back that same love to her. I think it's really important that when we're talking about what we're going to do with our loved ones, that whenever they say to us, now we want you to be there for us and whatever, and we don't want, my wife's grandmother made them promise that they would not send her to a nursing home. I think that impacted my mother-in-law greatly, because shortly after that was when her dementia kicked in at age 65. And I think it was taking care and trying to fulfill that promise. I think it's important for us to say to our family or whoever, I promise I will give you the very best care possible. That's what you're going to do. But that may mean an institution. That may be the greatest love decision that you ever make. If it's a mate, you promise before God to provide for them in sickness and in health. Your health or lot in life will no longer allow you to take care of them physically or emotionally. But that may be the very best thing for them. And you don't need to fret over that, because you're making the best thing that you can do to try to help them. And it certainly is a great love decision in that manner. Well, this handout that you got in front of you is what the church can do to help the caregiver. Call the caregiver and be willing to listen. In cancer, they call them your 2 a.m. friends. But do you have those kind of friends that you can call in the middle of the night and they're going to wake up and listen to you talk about what they did this time, or maybe something funny they did? One lady who was a church secretary, her mother, her daddy had this, and her mom called and said, "Will you talk to your daddy? He's all upset." And she said, "Okay." And so the daddy got on the phone, and the church secretary daughter said, "Well, Daddy, what's going on?" "Your mama's trying to kill me." He said, "Whoa, what do you mean by that?" He said, "She's feeding me oatmeal for breakfast, oatmeal for lunch, and oatmeal for supper." Well, in the background, the wife said, "Well, Fred, you know that's not true. It was bologna I gave you this morning." "That's right, bologna for breakfast, bologna for lunch, bologna." They had to die laughing about it. You know, you got to laugh. You're going to cry. And so be willing to listen. Bring a meal. Take-out meals are acceptable. Now check diet options, because you don't want to bring something that's going to fire things up and be a detriment to the health. You know, flaming tacos might not be the best thing for Daddy to eat around 11 o'clock at night when you're in the bathroom for a long period of time. Give time.
You say take out, you're talking about take something out of the freezer, you're saying?
Either way, take it out of the freezer and cook it for them, or go to a store, maybe a restaurant that they enjoy food, and give them a takeout meal that way. But again, ask them, rather than you choosing what you want. They may not want hot spaghetti, if you know what I mean, or flaming tacos that's got a sauce that will burn your tongue off. So be careful about the food that you're going to take to them. It's better, rather than you choosing, say, "Hey, what do you like to eat?" or "What does he like to eat?" or whatever. And then, because you're trying to help them. You don't want it to be a hindrance, you want it to be a help, and whatever. And sometimes that's interesting. Take the caregiver out on a date. Let somebody come and stay with them. Maybe if this is the mother, the wife that's the caretaker, let the husband come in and stay with him for that period of time, and she take her out and just shoot the breeze, talk about anything and everything. Those little moments of sanity, those little moments of breaking away is really, really important. Volunteer or have someone to come and clean the house. Provide time for people to go to support groups. My father-in-law was the main caregiver. My wife, we lived about 2 hours from there. The other daughter lived about 6 hours away. So he didn't want to take a time to go to a caregiving group. I wish he could have, but he just didn't want to do that. He was the main one. Provide time for them to go to those. It's important for us to pray for the caregiver by name. I think sometimes we do a disservice when in worship services, we just say, we need to pray for so-and-so, but we don't pray about what's their life is right now. I think we can talk about cancer now and announcements in terms of people who have cancer. Can we do the same with dementia? I mean, it's a legal disease. It's not a disease of the family. That is a disease of the brain. It's not a disease of the soul. We need to be willing to do that and be willing to pray for them, and certainly not judge in that situation. I've told people, I said, listen, you were going to come visit at 10 o'clock the next morning, and yet they call you at 8 and say it's really not a good time to come, and you think, well, you just messed up my schedule. You don't know what they've been going through all night long. Don't you dare go there until you've set in their moccasins for a couple of miles and realize what they're going through. And so it's really important to do that. Work on their time frame, not yours. Provide music for the patient's time and era. More and more, I did a webinar last week on music and memories, and how that music in the brain of people who are sick, even with dementia, that they can remember those things that are grooved into their brain, if you will. Because With girls, it's age 13. They remember the music like it was yesterday when they were 13. With guys, it's age 15. And so now they're in some of these places, they're providing soundtracks, and they have the little headphones and whatever, and you get 10 to 15 songs from that period of time in their life and play that. And folks that are catatonic or even hardly at all often come alive. And for that period of time, and not only does it help them then, but for the next 2 to 3 hours, they're more lucid. They know more. They talk intelligently. They remember family members. It's something about that music that brings them back to their sanity for just a little while. And wouldn't that be wonderful? When Google Alive Inside, and that's what it's called, and it shows a black man by the name of Henry that had been in this unit for 10 years, hardly spoken at all. And then they put these on him, and he begins to move. He's sitting there in his wheelchair, and he begins to sing. And then for the next 2 to 3 hours, he can talk lucidly about family members and the daughter that has been there for him all these years, and he knows the daughter. It's just something, we'd say miraculous. So it's God-given, if you will. But that's really important to try to help music. And somebody mentioned, who was it that mentioned church songs? Who was, yeah. And he mentioned that the nursing home, whatever, they just sing all the old favorite church songs. And Daddy hadn't sung in years, and all of a sudden here he is, singing.
That is so true.
And you film that because you want that for later on. It's really, really important. And that's a good thing that can be done. Give the Bible to them on CDs.
Just a thought. You mentioned 13 for the girls and 15 for the boys.
Yes.
We talk about training up our children. This is a long view look towards the future. When we're raising our kids for their adulthood, we might not even be here when they get to those points, but if we can get the gospel songs to them at those ages,
Yes.
that's something that they can hold on to for the rest of their lives.
Good point. Good point. You've got to hand out the L's of caregiving. Live in their world. You're meeting them in the now. Not the way they used to be, but the way they are. One fellow said, I had to learn my mother as the person she had become. She was not the same person I had grown up with, but she was different. My mother is more than her disease, is what one person put. And that's really important for us to do. You're trying to live in their world, so try to do that. Adjust your expectations. One occasion toward the latter ends of Mom's dementia, one time she was having one of those difficult nights, and so we were talking to her, and I said, Mom, you're still in charge. I said, you don't let them push you around. You're the boss. She said, that's right, but I don't think they know that. Well, we all had a good laugh about that, Whatever. That was her world. We're just going along with it, You're still in charge, Mom. Yeah, I know. They don't think they know that, But you got to do that. Learn to value their remaining talents and gifts. What can they do? Art, music, singing. They've gone around in some of these dementia units doing karaoke, and they have the movable mic and the microphone, and especially around Christmas time, and they're singing Christmas songs, and they go to this person who's done nothing, and all of a sudden, jingle bells, jingle bells. Why? It's been there. And it comes back to them. And how important that is for a family to hear that. And so you might be able to do that. Yes?
My husband has been able to attend church in almost a year now, and so we have communion and watch it on television in his room. And I started just letting him say the prayer for the communion when we have it. He can still do it.
Yes.
It's still there.
That's true.
And it gives him a little dignity.
That's true. And I'm going to mention that tomorrow night's lesson. that we try to, in some cases, dementia people can still be involved in the worship services. I remember they called on a young man called on a dementia person, Christian, and he said, "Dear God, thank you for this beautiful, beautiful time together." Those were his words. And I knew another situation where my wife's grandmother was at a place and she was with some Christian ladies and they were having a meal and some of them asked her to lead the prayer. And Mama couldn't even put sentences together, but she just prayed to God just like she always had. Why? That's such a part of who we are and how wonderful it is to be able to hear that. Yes, ma'am?
That is so true, because Annie is a Christian. And I mean, when it comes to God, she just lights up,
Yeah.
and it's so awesome. It's beautiful.
Oh yeah, brings tears to your eyes.
Yes.
Definitely. Live in their world, love them as they are, learn to value their remaining strengths and talents, let them maintain structured independence. Listen to what they say, listen to how they say it, to what they're not saying. Line up respite responsibility opportunities, take that trip, probably not a month, but if you can take a day and a half or something, just to do that. Linger on pleasant memories. That's really important. Look past the scribbling to the art. Dr. Richard Powers, you look up his name at UAB Hospital. He had a patient who couldn't dress himself, but he could play the piano in a beautiful way. And so this guy would just do that. Dr. Daniel Potts from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, had a father named Lester, and Lester had worked in a sawmill, and he got to the point where he could no longer talk. And he was in a specialized unit there in Tuscaloosa, but he began to paint and draw pictures. And his artwork was amazing, even with the things that were going along with them. And in that was a picture, was a drawing of a man, and it was the old-fashioned sawmill where one's on one end, pulling the saw, and the other's on the other, those huge logs. And he painted that man, and his son said, "That's Lester, isn't it?" And the daddy, who could not cry, nodded his head as tears came down his face. And he had painted his best friend who worked on the other end of the saw with him when he could not say the words. He could put in, and there's a book. If you'll go to Daniel Potts, you'll find that book. I forgot the name of the book, but he did a book talking about, told a lot of the artwork that his daddy did, even as bad as he was. Pete Key puts it this way: someone's destiny is tied to your assignment. And that is so true. How a person becomes, how a person lives, is based on how we treat them. Someone's destiny is tied to your assignment. It's really important. When personhood is strengthened, then dementia's hold is weakened. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the world of the patient and some things that we can do. Now, if you want to come ahead, I'll tell you what, we'll just pass all these out. I'll pass some of this side. These are some of the questions that people will ask whenever they're giving that test. But let's take about a 5-minute break and then come back and we will talk about the world of the patient. What do you need to know about doctor's visits? And there you go. Well, just say this is a checkup, because it is. This is something I'm going to pass around in case you're interested. It may be you're to the point where when your mother's in public or whoever this is, they may not know, they don't know how to order food or whatever the case may be, or they may act a little erratic. Somebody has come up with a couple of cards that you could easily make up, that you could easily hand to the waiter or waitress when they're not looking. So I'll pass those around and just come back all around. If you'll take them to that side and whatever, but you can make them whatever. You can even put, hey, this person before you is Annie, but she has dementia. Please understand that in regards to what she says or how she acts, something of that nature. But yes.
Just real quick, I want to make sure everybody knows we are broadcasting to YouTube. If anyone's got any concerns about that, please let me know. But we are doing.
Okay. Well, and so besides one person right now in this audience, I'm not sure of all the names. So thankfully, I'm not calling you by name. So hopefully that will work out in that regard. But when memory problems begin, you need to go see the proper doctors. Dr. John Morris of the Knights AD research in Washington and St. Louis says about half of all Alzheimer's cases and brain diseases go unnoticed. And sometimes what you think is dementia is not. An estimated 9% of patients showing dementia symptoms have reversible conditions. It could be a thyroid problem instead, excess fluid on the brain, vitamin deficiencies, especially B12, and side effects from other meds, or it just could be UTI or depression. So it's always important that you make sure that you get an accurate diagnosis. And it's always important that you be there for the doctor and take notes. 2 people are better than 1. And so when we went to UAB Kirkland Clinic in Birmingham, Alabama, the first time it was mom and dad and me. After that, it was always my brother or my sister with me or one of us, because 4 years are better than 2. Sometimes they talk quickly, if you know what I mean. Expect various questions to be asked by the doctor to the patient. The doctor is going to ask them to introduce the family members. Don't answer the questions for them. They may want you to, but don't. The doctor's asking her or him to introduce. They'll ask about pain management, activities of daily living, driving, work, education history, medical history. Expect those questions to be asked, and it's important to do that.
You being with the doctor?
No, we're with the doctor, and the doctor will ask her questions, and she'll lie to him. I'm doing okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then when we come out and say anything, she gets angry. Like we're,
Our doctor would meet with her privately, and then she'd meet with us and say, now this is what she said, if everything, because they would verify, because they realize that, you're talking to someone that's maybe not, the deck is not as full as it needs to be in that manner, because that's really helpful. Ask if it's all right to record the discussion. Again, the doctor may or may not want you to do that, but if you're talking about your loved one, then that might be helpful, especially if other family members aren't on board yet, if you know what I'm talking about. Yes, ma'am.
I have found that it's helpful to make a list before you go.
Yes.
Of the concerns that you have and observations to give to the doctor. In reality, that person believes they are okay.
Good point.
And they may say they are fine, and they can't remember the details.
Good point. Thank you for saying that, because you're right. They may think, well, what am I even here for, and whatever that nature. Bring all the medicines, including prescriptions and over-the-counter. Insist that the doctor explain medical conditions and diagnosis to you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a friend that I deal with and take her to doctor's appointments. And she'll get upset with me when I say something to the doctors about some medication she's on. And she'll tell me she doesn't need to know that.
First, sometimes the doctor hopefully will meet with you. You know, these can't be those 8 to 10 minute visits. You know, it's going to take a while. This test takes 30 to 45 minutes or longer for them to go over. They're typically 25 to 30 questions. And make sure that you're on the list, if you know what I mean, to be able to call and make inquiries, change appointments and whatever. Initially, I was the first one that got started with all this. And when we called and they, you know, we said we need to find a neurologist and whatever, they said it's going to be 6 months. Well, she was already having problems. And so I would call back at different times. Pat, the nurse, bless her. Pat was the one there in the doctor's office and said, if you'll call back on, I think she said it was either Thursday afternoon or Friday afternoon, that's where a lot of times things are canceled. And I explained to her, I said, listen, they're coming, Birmingham, Alabama, they're coming 2.5 hours away from Amory, Mississippi to there. And I said, I'm coming from Florence, which is another 2.5 hours. I said, we need to try to get this done. She got us in 4 months ahead of time, just by continuing to call. And so, ma'am?
The squeaky wheel gets.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's exactly right. And so find you a Pat, somebody that will work with you and not just a name, but a person and whatever. The questions, you can see here what you've got before you. They need to answer the questions. And sometimes, at first, they were introducing, it was all there. But then they said, well, Ms. Williams, we want to talk with you for a few minutes. And that's when they asked her all these questions. And that was just them and them alone. Then she came back and told us, this is what your mom started out. There are 30 questions. There may be different places, but 30 questions were they asked. She started out at 24 out of 30. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, that's 80%, right? 18 months later, it was 12 out of 30. Same test. And so you see the situation itself. After diagnosis, you know, we've got to find out what is there and what is lost. Let's look at. Let me explain a few of the things on your page, second page, hallucinations. One person told the story that their loved one said, I can't sleep because there's a rabbit underneath my bed and it keeps on jumping up and I just can't go to sleep. Those hallucinations. So guess what the caregiver did? She went and got a sack and got a broom and said, now you hold the sack and I'm going to go under the bed and I'm going to get him up and I want you to catch him now. And guess what? The caregiver caught the rabbit that was not there, but she thought was there, and then she went to sleep. Well, now what'd she do? She involved her in the situation. And if that's possible, let them do that. You know there's not a rabbit there, but she does. And so let them be a part of it. Alcohol or drug usage. Dr. Richard Power says both of them hurt the brain. Not only biblically, we know that they're wrong, but they actually hurt the brain. The middle questions, the name of the president. I remember they would ask her the president before and then the present president. Those 3 words to remember. Something that we keep in mind. Draw a clock, the old-timey clock. Do you know which way the hands go? Somebody came up during the break and said, my doctor asked these questions to me right now. I said, well, that's great. That's really good. Repeat those words. Spell world backwards. Can we do that? World backwards, all right? D-L, okay, you got it. Exactly right. Subtraction problem. Let's try that. We're going to start at 60 minus 4, okay? 60 minus 4 equals 56, minus 4 equals 52, minus 4 equals 48. There you go. Can you do that? Those things, today's month, date, whatever. Name all the words you can that begin with the letter F toward the end. That's one of the tests that they give you over the phone. If you call the 800 number and say, I want a mental test, they will do that. And show me how, I remember, show me how you use to drive, use a hammer to drive a nail. And of course, they're just, wanting executive, do you understand what I'm saying? That type of thing. Before pointing to the door, point to the ceiling. Can you understand directions? So, point to the ceiling, and then you point to the door. Can they do that? That's something to keep in mind. The balance test. People who can't pick their feet up, there's something to be said that physically, but there's also neurologically something going on. And so all those things, they may change some of the tests, but these are typically the questions that they ask. Anybody had some of your loved ones go over the question just like this? Okay. So now, after that, after we get that done, now what do we need to do? Focus on what is there, not what is lost. We know what's lost, but what's there? Because those are our loved ones, and it's important for us to keep that in mind. And Teepa Snow, if you Teepa Snow, she does a great deal of this work. And she says a lot of times when she comes into a room where there's a dementia patient really, really bad off, she'll start singing, take me out to the ball game, take me out to the crowd. And guess what? They start singing with her. And she's just finding a way in. Hey, here's a friend. And then she starts talking to them. But she said that she does something like that. What are their pillars of personhood? This concept suggests the idea of what you want the doctor to know, what you want others to know about this person. Who are they? I see them, but who are they? And so, I would say my mother was the church secretary for many years. For 20 years, she put us through Free-Hardeman College because Dad was a full-time minister and didn't get paid a great deal or whatever, even though he did that for many, many years. And they put 3 kids through Free-Hardeman. And she was 20 years of physical therapist aide. She would go to Russia with Dad on at least 2 occasions to do missionary work. She would teach Bible classes. She loved to cook. You can look at me and see, that she enjoyed doing that. That's what people needed to know about her, not just Dot Williams, but the person that she was. And you can say the same things about your loved ones as well. Use it or lose it. Stimulate your mind. It's really, really important to do that. You want blood to flow throughout the body. The magical word is let's. Mama, let's sit down and listen to this song. Mama, take these 2 sticks in your hand, and there's a big beach ball in front of you, and we're going to play, let's rock around the clock. We're going to play that on the music, and I want you to play the drums. They do that in those units. They do that. And it's amazing how even some of the ones that are just hardly, they get into that. It's just something different. Okay, I've got to ask Miss Nancy, what are you saying back there? I see you whispering.
I was telling her, that's one thing my husband won't participate in.
He won't participate.
He says, I think that's silly.
Think that's silly. Okay, well, at least he thinks it's silly. But a lot of people will do something like that. Or stack cups. Those little red cups. Rolo cup. Thank you. Just play with stacking. Put 2 here, then 3 here, then 4 here. And you're making them think. And it's just right there in front of them. They can do that right there if they're sitting on something. Anything that keeps them that way. Social stimulation is so important. Talk about where were they born. Sometimes take the atlas, the world, and say, now, Mama, where were you right here, especially in the United States? And you used to travel to Dearborn, Michigan, and where is that? And you go, well, way up here. and whatever. You know, anything to just keep their mind moving is what's really, really important. One lady said, I need to go to the restroom. Do you need to go? So they just all went together. I used to think that was a woman's thing, but I think that's a man's thing sometimes too, you know. So we put, well, maybe I do need to go, you know. It's just the idea of stimulation. It's important. Spiritual exercises allows one to connect with God. Many of you know the name Becky Blackman. Written a lot of good ladies' books. Ooh, the one on prayer. Ooh, it's awesome. I've gotten sermons out of that book. But her mom had dementia for a good long while. And she said that one time a nurse told her, said, your mom may forget who you are, but she will never forget who God is. It's ingrained within her. Some of you may know the name David Looney. He's a gospel preacher, and also he and his wife Kay are professional counselors down in Mississippi. And his mom had dementia, and so she went to the neurologist to take that test, and she didn't know hardly any of the answers. 30 questions, she didn't know hardly any of them. And when the doctor came back and said, well, your mom, didn't do too well on that test, and she just didn't know who the president was and where she was and where we are and all those things. And David said, Mom, what does Ephesians 2 verses 8 and 9 say? For by grace are you saved through faith, not of yourselves, it's the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should. What's John 3:16? For God so loved the world. Over and over again, he said, Doctor, why is it that she can pull those things up and she can't answer your questions? And I wrote it down, what he said. The mind can remember what the heart was trained to do. Doesn't that just hit you where it needs to? I mean, I have chills when I say that. The mind can remember what the heart was trained to do. Proverbs 23, verse 6, as he thinks, verse 7, as he thinks in his heart, his mind, so is he. They pull from that reservoir of that religious faith, that love for God and for his church. And so spiritual exercises can do that. The next 7 to 8 hours of sleep are mandatory for good health. That's for anybody. It wouldn't be wonderful for us to smile like that, whatever. When you sleep deprived, it changes your brain. Limit that caffeine for your loved ones, especially in the afternoon. It's not going to be your friend later on when they don't want to go to sleep. If you have to have a short nap, make sure it's way before. You don't want to do anything after 2 o'clock. And 15-minute naps, they say, 20-minute naps at the most. An hour nap, they said, is not good for you. Interaction with friends and family are vital. It's really important. I was doing a workshop there in Florence, and during the break, a lady came up to me and she said, my grandmother's, her last name is Murphy, and everybody just called her Murphy. And said, we got to the point where she just wouldn't listen to it. We'd say, Mom, you got to eat. And she wouldn't eat. And she said, the 3-year-old granddaughter would go in there and say, Murphy, you need to eat. And put the food in front of her, and she ate. Just not listening to adults, but a 3-year-old's mom controlling grandma. There's something about that. And so whatever works is really important. And then Teepa Snow puts it this way. If they can do a piece of the puzzle, let them do it. Can they brush their teeth? We know what they can't do. What can they do? Can they pull their pants on? Can they tie a shoe? Don't worry about the product, but focus on the process. Mom was the consummate of cooks, but she could no longer do that because she could still make a ham sandwich. My sister would have her fold clothes. She could do that. Took her a lot longer, but that's okay. Cut up eggs. The difference between two choices and none is significance. Think about the independence they've lost, all the things that they can't do. And so you say, do you want to wear this shirt or this one? Visual. Because they can't tell you what they want to wear, but you show it to them and give them a choice. And that's really important. And then this one I just can't say enough about. Most everyone responds to touch in a positive way. Many of you know you don't go behind a dementia patient to touch them because it scares them. They can't see what is behind them. So you do it out front, you know. And yes, ma'am.
What do you do if the patient doesn't think she's lost her memory? That's our mother.
When she thinks she hasn't lost her mind.
She's got dementia, we know that. But you try telling her that you forgot, she'll go, hey, I'm 92 years old, and she'll even tell the doctors this. I'm 92 years old, I'm old, so I'm good. And she just, I mean, we try to call, we call her on it and everything, and she just won't believe, because like I said, well, Mom, you're forgetting. Well, you're close to my age and you forget. You know? Why we get those kind of responses?
It's tough when the reasoning with you sometimes that makes sense.
Right. I mean, the reasoning, just to get her to see that she'll say, oh, I must be losing my marbles. And we want to say, yes, you are. But, you know, but if you try to tell her that, it's like, well, you forget all the time. And I go, okay, Mom.
Just act as if, yes ma'am, go ahead.
There's a term for that, you can Google it. It's called anosogosia, and there's YouTube videos about it. You might get some suggestions there. A-N-O, let's see. E-N-O-S-O-G-N-O-S-I-A.
That last word is part of a Greek word meaning I do not know. Because sometimes when I was taking Greek at Free-Hardeman, agno-ao means I do not know, and the teacher never liked that answer. Even if we quoted Greek, nah, that's not going to make it. You know, agno-ao, no, I don't know. Yeah, have them write that down. You have to play the game and do the best you can with it. You know, because you don't want to, you're not going to lie or whatever. But touch is so important. God knew what he was doing whenever he made our body. There's 3,000 human receptors in one fingertip. And 1/3 of all the human receptors in this whole body are in our hands. When Jesus touched the leper, he didn't have to touch it to heal him, but he did that because he was of worth and value. And our loved ones are that way. And so, to take them by the hand, to be there for them, touch is so important, and it's really needful for us to do. If behavior is triggered, and I'm sure that you've seen that face before, maybe go back to making sleep better. Serve the last meal in the early evening and watch the portion. Avoid caffeine and chocolate late. That chocolate, those 2 to 3 ounces we talked about earlier a day, you know, do that earlier, not later, because that may not be your friend in terms of sleeping. Tune into what they're reading or viewing. Limit the news that can cause bad dreams or nightmares. Keep a night light on to allow them to see when they're getting up. This is something I never thought of before. Lay down in their bed when they're not there and look from their point of view at what they can see. There may be a light that's shining on them at that time that you didn't see because it's the daytime. And so you want to do that. Is there a mirror that's reflecting light or causing shadows early in the morning? Look at it from their view, literally, by beginning in their bed. In the day, by rolling yarn or looking through a picture book of favorite things. Something relaxing. Not something really, you know, getting them fired up. Use a dry erase board to announce what's going on the next day. Put the day and the date. Give a foot or back or hand massage. We all like that, right? And older people will as well. Wake up slowly. open up shades and ask them to get up and come back in and turn on a little quiet music, not AC/DC or something like that. ELO. Then make a little noise outside the room, then more light is needed. And involve them in activities. Let them help make the bed, wash dishes, fold clothes. Mom can make deviled eggs. Why don't we call them deviled eggs? We eat them in church, but whatever. She can do that. Help with flower arrangements. I'll show you a picture later on about that. Write letters to friends and family. Now they got that vase with all the different colors of sand. Say, hey, Mom, let's put this together and give this to so-and-so. And so, you pour so much white sand and then the brown sand and then the whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just letting them create something. Because in some cases, they know they haven't created anything in a long time. And that's really, really important. And when you see that face, ask the question why. Studies have shown lately that 33 to 50% of agitation is a result of pain that they can't tell you about. They may be acting up because they're feeling a pain in their body, but they can't tell you it's here or whatever. And so that agitation, especially in the hospital, maybe because of something that's going on that they don't know about. Why are they agitated? Is it a new roommate? Did the room get moved? Are there new staff members? People don't know who they are. Is there a change in medication? Try to pull people out of a stressful situation. Give them space. And it's important for us to know this. They don't know that they don't know. That nurse practitioner, Miss Hackett, looked at my brother and my dad. Dad was in his mid-70s then. No, he was in his 80s then. And he said, do not, she pointed her finger at us, do not set your mother up for failure. She can't remember, take that word out of your vocabulary. You're just adding stress to the situation, and it's going to come back to haunt you. She said in 15 seconds what we've been struggling with, but she was exactly right. We needed to do that. And my dad, who was the main caregiver, was doing that. And it was hard for him to get that out of his mind to do, but he said, I've got to do that. Think of it, the word R, A-R-E. Don't argue, don't reason, don't explain. You're just setting yourself up. Instead, you're not giving a choice. Let's do this, Mom. Mike Vestal, preacher in Texas, was working in a nursing home for dementia patients doing a Bible class or something. And he said, one of the ladies came up to him and said, Brother Bike, I am so glad that you said we will recognize each other in heaven because I can't remember anybody's name here on earth. Isn't that sweet? Yes, ma'am.
I've stopped asking my husband what did he have for lunch. Instead I say, did you like your lunch today?
There you go.
And that has helped.
There you go. That's true. That's true. Yes.
Don't argue what the other two.
Don't argue, don't reason, don't explain. A-R-E.
I have one more thing too, is that, like if they take something, like Ann will take my purse, and, I just let her carry it, or, my boot or my coat or what, I just let her have it, because eventually she'll, just put it somewhere, but, you don't try to grab it back or anything like that, you just let them go and have whatever it is, if it's not gonna hurt them.
Right.
Because they'll eventually, just put it somewhere.
Right. Right. That's true. That's true. In the end, we have to remember that they're not going to remember what you do. About 2 or 3 months after my mother-in-law's death, Lisa had already lost her grandmother to it, her great-grandmother, and then her mom. one of our daughter-in-laws took all the jewelry that her mother would wear as a preacher's wife for over 40 years, and she put those together. She gave half of them in this form to my wife and the other to her sister, just as a way of lifting up her memory. And Lisa could look at those and say, Mom would wear those on Sundays, those would be for holidays, those. And so we don't forget, and that's just a wonderful tribute that we can do in that manner. Okay, we're going to take about a 5-minute break. It's 11:10, so we're just right on time. Then we're going to come back and talk about dementia, the long goodbye, how we can help ourselves and how we can help them in the journey. So let's say about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll finish that last section. And there's one handout. If somebody wants to pass these out.
No.
There are so many things I know you could have been doing today, so we want to be sure to be finished by 12 o'clock so that you can go on. But I just want to thank you for your willingness to come. This is a large group to be a part of this, and I would love your input on how we can improve this. My brother and I have done about 110 grief workshops over the last 30 years. We've done about maybe 10 to 15 of the dementia cancer workshops. But that's just something that's near and dear to my heart because my mom, and there's my mom right there. And that was, I guess, that was probably 1 year or so before she passed away. But I certainly do it in her honor. So feel free to write down with or without your name, hey, I wish you'd have talked about this more, or this was helpful, or whatever. I would love to hear from you. I really would. And I appreciate that. We're going to talk about ambiguous loss. We'll explain what that is and some things concerning about that. But the fact is, that's what we're dealing with. You're losing and grieving because you're providing the care because Charlie isn't Charlie anymore. A survey of 400 caregivers in Indiana was asked, what's the greatest barrier you face as a caregiver? 80% of them said, letting go of the person you used to know. And many of you can understand that. It's sort of like what this person said. Part of me dies as I watch my husband, my lifelong companion, lover and confidant, slip away a little part at a time. Helen Fitzgerald tells the realities that dementia can cause. She was visiting her mom in a nursing home. And she said, I was sitting there and she reached out with her cane and pushed it into my feet. I thought she was kidding until I looked at her face and saw that she was not smiling. She meant to hurt me. It was the first of the many little deaths that would follow. And I understand, I know that you can remember those first events that happened. Perhaps you can remember the first time we realized something was wrong with your loved one. They keep on asking the same question over and over again, or when they did not remember who they were or who you were. A lot of times we have this great loss that just comes in different times. And Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with this concept of anticipated grief, where you know that something is coming. And she says that's where a loved one is slipping away, those little deaths, the lack of recognition of themselves or of you, becoming hostile. Cynthia Orange talks about visiting her mom in a memory care facility. And she could go out on special occasions, so she brought her mom home with the family for Easter. And the mom was sitting there and she was thanking her for the great meal, complimented on her nice family that was around her, which was her family, even though she couldn't remember that. And she said, you know what I wish? And all the children said, what, Mom? And she said, at times I wish I had children. And it was just that painful reminder that she didn't even know or recognize her family. in anticipated loss, there is that mutual conflicting demands of holding on, letting go, and drawing closer to the dying patient. That's what anticipated grief is. There's grief for the future. Plans that were made have to be put on hold or done away with. Loss of the present. They're not comfortable with getting around others. Or, as you say, family or friends stop visiting because they either want to remember them the way they were, or sometimes crowds may confuse the patient. What about you? What do you do with dementia in the holidays? I would suggest that you try to have it, but at the same time do it in small forms. Maybe it's too much for 30 family members to come all at one time. So if you've got 4 brothers and sisters, say, hey, we want to come, and you bring your family, but just come for this hour and a half, and then bring the other hour and a half, and do it in the daytime so that she won't just feel, or he won't feel just all consumed. And keep it simple in regards to things and whatever, but that's important to do that. But there's sometimes, the grief of the past, where they can't remember things from the past. And there's another term, ambiguous loss. Pauline Boss came up with this in the 70s. It's loss and grief of folks that are in 2 different ways. Either physically present but psychologically absent, like dementia, where physically the person's there but psychologically they're not there. And that's an ambiguous loss. It's sort of hard to understand. Somebody said, water runs through your fingers and then it goes down and it becomes ice. And so this is husband, but he's not the husband, yet he is the husband. Ambiguous loss. Or it can be another way where they're psychologically present, but physically absent. Like a missing person. Think about 9/11, those 3,000 people that died. In some cases, there aren't any bodies. So some people may still be thinking that their loved one's walking around somewhere in New York City, or perhaps somewhere else. Or adoption, where you were going to adopt and all of a sudden it fell through. I was the director of North Alabama Christian Children's Home in Florence, Alabama for over 16 years. And a lot of our children dealt with this kind of loss because their parents weren't present because they were the ones that had caused the issues. Either they died and thus they were true orphans. In Alabama, you're an orphan if you've lost one parent to death. And so we had, all of our children are orphans in that sense. But they were psychologically present because so many of them believed that mama and daddy's going to come and get me anytime. And so I don't have to listen to your rules. I'm just going to be here for a short. One person wouldn't even unpack. He just lived out of a suitcase because he just knew that something was going to change. So it was this kind of ambiguous loss. They were living in limbo. Yeah, we're providing, they're taken care of, and we're providing their food and their nurture and taking them to school and the church and all those things. But ultimately, somehow he's going to come and get me. And that ambiguous loss was that way. And divorce can certainly be that way, where the person is no longer there, but the imprint of who they were is felt in your life as a mate and also your children, where they're no longer there, but the things that they taught them still enter into all that. And so that makes it that much harder in that regard. A lady in Mobile was talking about her daughter who was dealing with the early onset, anything before 65 is early onset, that a husband had. He no longer recognized her, yet she was the main caregiver. Yet because he did not recognize her as his wife or as a family member, she couldn't even sleep in the same bed with him because he wouldn't allow that because he didn't know, who are you? You know, you can imagine. And so she's taking care of the one who doesn't even understand who the one taking care of is.
Now, in those situations, do you, like, sometimes, like you said on that story, that I have no family. Can you say, well, Mom, no, we are your family? Or is that just going to create an argument?
You can try it, and then if it doesn't work, just say, well, we're as good as family, aren't we? You know, rubbing your feet, whatever. You know, and we're pretty high cotton. I don't use that phrase down. That's down south, high cotton phrase. But you know, whatever you want to say. Well, yeah, we must be pretty good friends and be able to do this for you, and try to make it a positive way without forcing the argument because she doesn't recognize you as the daughter or daughter-in-law, whatever the case may be. You can try and see what happens. And then, if not, just go on with it the best you can.
We'll adopt you for today.
I'm sorry, what?
We'll adopt you for today.
There you go. Yeah. Why don't we adopt you? See where that works. It's whatever. Well, how do we deal with this ambiguous loss where they are physically present but psychologically and mentally absent, or the other way around? What can we do to do it? Well, first of all, don't rush yourself into moving on. You need to have closure with this kind of grief. Secondly, take comfort in the knowledge that your feelings are normal. Learn who your true friends are that are there for you. It's really important that you have people who are there to support you in your journey. Set and maintain appropriate and respectful boundaries. Some people want to swoop in and fix it in a short period of time, or fix you, as the case may be. Well, just understand that they don't understand what you're going through, and so there's some people who just don't understand, and you've just met one of them, if you know what I mean. And at the same time, set those boundaries. Some people in your family are going to be with you for the journey. Others aren't. You'll find that out pretty quick. And so just go with what you can in that manner, and that can be helpful. Set and maintain, where we just talked about that, those folks who try to fix you and such like. Self-care, we've talked about that along the way, that you got to put your mask on before you help somebody else's. A study was done on the stress of caring for an Alzheimer's patient, and it determined that it can prematurely age the immune system, which then can cause you to have some age-related issues. About 50% of caregivers deal with depression of some form because of everything that they go out with. With that in mind, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. If mom can't endure traditions like she once did, then make it a smaller event. Have families come in one at a time. Have them visit at different times. Reconstruct your identity. Who you are now versus who you used to be. You have to settle that in your own mind. The child becomes the parent. That's the role that you have to play. And so you live with that. Normalize ambivalence, mixed feelings. You love the person affected and you want them to be around as long as they can. At the same time, you may be, as the main caregiver or the only caregiver, get to the point where you just think, I'm so tired. I wish this could end. Now, you're not saying you want them to die, but you're feeling the point. You're not wishing their death, but at the same time, You may feel trapped and burdened by the constant demands that it brings. Realize that's normal. You're not wishing ill toward somebody. You want them to live as long as they can. You're going to give them the best of the care that you can. But if they're a faithful child of God, you know that there's a better place waiting them. And it's okay for you to admit that. Yes, ma'am.
Please don't be afraid to ask for help.
Good point. Please don't be afraid to ask for help. That's spiritual help, that's physical help, that's mental health, all those things. It's really important. This is a journey, and you should not have to take it alone. I'm going to mention this again tomorrow, but one of the saddest verses in all the Bible is found in Psalm 142, verse 4. Psalm 142, verse 4. I looked on my right hand and beheld, but there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. No man cared for my soul. Isn't that sad? Here's somebody in need of help. He's looking for help. He turns right here to the right. There's no one there. And how terrible that would be if your church isn't there. And I trust that's not the case, that your church is there. But please, thank you for saying that. And that can't be emphasized again. It's okay to normalize your ambivalence. You don't want them to suffer. But at the same time, when they don't realize where they are and they're just, you realize that they're not feeling well, whatever, it's okay to think there's a better place awaiting them. And we've done all that we can do. And it's okay to think of a time when that's not going to be the case. You don't do anything about it, but at the same time, you're trying to do it. That goes along with the next idea, revise your attachment. Celebrate your loved one while at the same time mourn the parts that are gone. And then next, remember your loved one's feelings of ambiguous loss. Patty Davis was the daughter of President Ronald Reagan. When they announced that he had Alzheimer's in 1984, she said, my father started growing quiet as Alzheimer's started claiming more of him. Those early stages are the hardest because they're aware that they're losing their awareness. And so we need to understand that. Having talked about that loss, physically present, psychologically absent, or the other way around, what do we do to help ourselves in that regard? Well, accept the diagnosis for what it is. Make sure that you get the diagnosis. Feel the burn. List the losses. Perhaps sometime when you're thinking about yourself and that loved one, make a list of how Alzheimer's or where the disease is has changed you. You know how it's changed them, but how has it changed you? Maybe sometimes that helps to be a little bit more accountable by thinking about that. Have someone on call at all times. Those 2 a.m. friends that are there to rant, rave, cry, or just be there for you. Be kind to yourself. Put up sticky notes that says, I am strong. I can get through this. Let go and let God. That's important. Validate the time periods in dementia. Describe your loved one before the disease and now after the disease. That might help validate some of the feelings that you have. Mourn your losses. In grief, I tell you, everybody has a story. They're just looking for someone that they can tell it to. And a lot of times when we're doing grief workshops, we hear grief stories and we try to help people with those because shared grief may not be half grief, but it helps to tell others about it. Validate your emotions, your feelings. Let the tears flow. Tears of sorrow, grief, desperation can turn inward. Tears of determination, hope, and compassion can be turned outward. Healing tears move to action and can cause growth. A grief burst is when it just comes unexpectedly and in big amounts. Society allows who to cry? Women and or men? Which one? Women, right? Now, men can cry for a little while, but not too long. Remember the movie Rocky that came out when Rocky's manager, Mick, had a heart attack right before one of his fights? You remember that in the movie? And Rocky didn't want to leave him, and his wife stays with him. And then he gets beaten up, and he comes in, and Mick is dying. And when he dies, you remember what he did? He's crying boatloads of tears. He's wailing. He's weeping. That was one of the first times that Hollywood had ever shown an actor portraying those emotions. And it sort of opened the door. And there have been other movies since that time. Fellas, I rarely cry like a baby, but I often cry like a man. We need to remember that. It's okay. I was doing a workshop on grief 2 weekends ago back in the Lebanon, Tennessee area. And a fellow that used to be one of the elders there, lost his wife to cancer. He said, sometime after the funeral, I met these men who had all lost their wives. And they get together once a month or so, and they go out to eat, and they talk about their journey through grief. And he said, well, we got to the point where we would get our food at a restaurant and then go to one of the men's barns and sit around the table and laugh and cry and play games and whatever the case may be. He said, we even got hats that said the barn and shirts that said the barn. And he said, do you know that saves my life to go there every month, to be with those men, to laugh with them, to cry with them? I said, wow, how amazing that is. In Chattanooga, Tennessee, a man who was an elder of the church there lost his wife, and he said, my grief room, the place where I can go and show my emotion, and it's not literally a room, but that's where it happened to be, was the elder's office. And he said, those elders would allow me, 9 to 10 men, to come in there and talk about not just how my wife died, but how she lived. And those men would put their arms around me and they'd cry with me. That's biblical, right? That's the way God meant for it to be. A family weeps with those that weep and loves those that loves. And that's the way it ought to be. And that's so very, very important. Well, also, what can we do to help ourselves in grief, in the grief that we feel because of what we're dealing with? Well, express your anger positively. You say, well, how do you do that? I've talked to people in their grief journey, and they talk about, you know, I needed to rake the leaves in my yard, and I raked that so hard that I broke that rake. And he said, it gave me, I just felt good doing it. Someone said, I sometimes just need to hit something. I said, well, there's some laws about that, so you got to be careful. But take a pillow and take your tennis racket and hit it as hard as you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. Or go out to the yard sale and buy 10-cent glassware at a yard sale. Now listen, please follow along here. Then go to a dumpster and open the lid and throw the glass into the dumpster as hard as you want to. They have rooms like that, I think, down south. I don't know if y'all got them up here or not, but you can actually go in and break things, you know, and pay money to do so. But express your anger positively. Make peace with guilt. You did everything that you need to do. There may have been a few things that you did wrong, but you did everything that you needed to do, and you did the very best that you could. Know the law of thirds. I thought this was neat. Alan Wolfelt, who up in Colorado has a lot of stuff on grief, especially as it relates to teenagers, says that he has found in the challenges and struggles of life, 1/3 of the people that you come in contact with will be supportive and helpful. 1/3 is going to be neutral. They're going to start either way. And 1/3 is not going to be helpful, but they're going to be hurtful. He said, just stay close to the first ones, the ones that are helpful, and keep that in mind. Make friends with relief. If a patient stops exhibiting a harsh symptom or behavior, be grateful. Ride it as long as it can. Get some respite care for several days. And if they move to a facility that can maintain structured care, be grateful. And then remember the good times. That's really important. Remember the good times. I shared with you the memory book, and that was so helpful. And every time my mom looked at it, it was brand new to her. But that was helpful to her, and it was helpful to us. Keep a journal. Perhaps it's helpful to write down things, your thoughts and your memories. Let water refresh you. Water is so important. There's Mom with that memory book, and she enjoyed it every time she opened it. Water refresh you. A hot bath, walking in the rain. The world's over 70% water. The breaking of water like waves are known to release negative ions, which can purify the air and increase energy levels in humans. Seek the spiritual. Know that in this journey, as God's child, He is with you. Psalm 46, verse 1, God is, not God was, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. I remember on one occasion sitting with Mom in Sunday school at their church there in Amory, Mississippi, where Ron and I were born. And as a Sunday school teacher was up there quoting scriptures, she was doing so as well. She still had that memory. Now, she couldn't tell you what she just ate, but that was so ingrained in her. And so that was really important. And then the handout that you have in front of you, I've got to tell you about that picture. That was the last Mother's Day that Mom lived. And it was my good fortune to have Mom and Dad with us for that weekend there in Florence, Alabama. We were in church services there at the Florence Boulevard Church of Christ, where I'd served as a deacon. And we'd had the songs, and then the very beginning there was an opening prayer. And I thought to myself, how many more times am I going to get next to my mom? And so instinctively, I just reached over. She was on one side, my wife was on the other side, and I held her hand, and that's my Bible underneath it. And my wife saw that, and she took that picture. I wouldn't give $1 million for that picture. It's in my, where our clothes are. It's right there in that room. I see it, I saw it this week, and it just brings back so many good memories. And that is so, so very important. What can we do to help ourselves? Meet your loved ones where they are. That's what the handout is that you've got before you. Meet them where they are. This was that Mother's Day weekend, about 2 months before Mom died. And so my wife said, well, we're going to buy some flowers and put together an arrangement. And so my dad and I went somewhere else, and Mom and Lisa were there, and they were working on those. And so when I came in, you can see on her face, she's just trying to figure out, how do you do this, and what do you do, and whatever. You can see it sort of working with her in regards to trying to put it in the right place. But after a while, she got the wreath together. And so I said, Mom, show me your wreath. I wouldn't give anything for this picture. All that struggle, and there's the celebration. That's what you want them to do. You want them to succeed. Meet them where they are. And that's so important to do that. Try to feel what dementia's like. There's a book entitled Still Alive, written by Lisa Genova, Genova. And there's another one called Turn of Mind by LaPlante that describe what it's like to deal with this disease. Sometimes it's helpful. Communicate through the senses. Art, massage, the scent of food, cooking, hugs and touch, music, essential oils, petting a dog or a cat. In some of the advanced units, they bring in animals that the people, they just gravitate to them. There's something about those childlike memories of of animals that they had. And there's a thing called Fur Real. That's one of my granddaughters, and she has one. This fur, F-U-R-R-E-A-L, you can buy them, I believe at one time about $60, $70. But they act like a dog, or they act like a cat, and they purr, and they move around. And these folks who can't hardly even talk will hug those. And so important it is. And it's really important to have communication through the senses. And then find ways for them to succeed. Mom couldn't cook any longer, but she could make ham sandwiches. And she could draw pictures for Sunday school. And so my father and my brother-in-law, they're in Amory, would have Mama Dot to draw the pictures for the Sunday school Bible classes. And notice how perfect she is. She can stay within the lines. I couldn't do that on a good day. But that would be a picture of those, and then he'd run those off, and they'd give them to the Sunday school students on Sunday, and then that would be about the lesson. And that was something that she could succeed in, and that was important. And that would be something that you find ways for them to succeed. Demonstrate to others those pillars of who they are, the personhood. Express love while you can. I think that was that last, as it turned out, the last Mother's Day. I went out and bought the biggest card Walmart had. I wanted Mom to enjoy that. And so that's what she did. And it's really important. Live one day at a time. Matthew 6, verse 34. Don't take any thought for tomorrow. Live today. Do it while you can. This one's really important. Decide who's all in on your journey. There may be some family that just aren't going to be helpful. That's their loss. I typically see them at the funeral trying to make up for the time that they didn't spend with a loved one. Oh, that's not a good enough casket. Oh, that's not a big enough spray of flowers. Oh, we need to do this. They're just trying to make up for their feelings of guilt. Decide who's in with you and develop that team that you can be. You know, there's a team in dementia that people need. You need somebody to help you with finances, somebody with yard work. Maybe he was the one that did it, but they're still at home, or whatever the case may be. Who can help with respite? Times to get on. What about legal? There's paperwork that you've got to change because he can no longer make those decisions, or she can no longer make those decisions. So somebody's got to take care of that. You don't want that to end at death and then have to probate all of that. What about somebody that can fix things at the house? You know, something breaks. Who do you have that can do that? Who can watch the children or grandchildren, as the case may be? What about the car? Who can take care of that? What about plumbing, the HVAC, spiritual needs? So many things that go along with it. Go with the flow. Something that didn't work, try another one. A daughter came in and the mother wouldn't budge, wouldn't listen to anything she had to say. She went outside, took off her coat, came back in. How are you doing, Mom? And she did everything she asked her to do. Just a little change of the way things looked. You adapt, you go with the flow. Look for the blessed behind the mess. Lisa's grandmother was singing some church songs with her, and her daddy was over working on a light. And so Mama said, John, what are you doing? They'd just been singing, Do All in the Name of the Lord. That was a song they'd just sang. And so Mama looked over and John was working on this light. John, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm changing out the light. Or are you doing it in the name of the Lord? You know, I was still on her ride. And so you had to have a little moment of that. I told somebody during the break, one time we called back home. We were in Mobile doing a grief workshop. And while we were talking on the phone, I said, Mom, Ron's a loose cannon. He is acting up here. I said, what can I do? I don't know where this came from. She said, step on his big toe real hard and see if it makes a difference. We just died laughing, violence, but where that came from, we all laughed about it because, that was what it was. Learn to play while they can. Whatever it is that they can do. If it's ping pong, if it's crayons, if it's sidewalk chalk, if it's blowing bubbles, whatever they can do. It's a victory. A lady told me about taking her mom to Opryland there in Nashville. And they stayed, there's a beautiful garden in the side if you've ever been there. And she said, we stayed a few nights and said, Mom was so tired, but she wouldn't give anything to see the love that she had for those gardens and our time together. And so learn to play what they can and then finally finish what they've started. Maybe this disease halted a project or a life goal that they had. Maybe there's some act of benevolence that you can do for the nursing home or the hospital that helped them. When I started at the North Alabama Christian Children's Home as their director, the first financial contribution outside the churches that I got was from my parents. And I have a picture of Dad and Mom and that check that they gave me. When she died, Dad thought that she would want the children's home to be remembered in regards to any financial gifts that people might choose to give in her honor. Over $9,000 was given by family and friends all over the place. And so it helped our children while at the same time lifting her up and help her in that regard. So that's really, really important. Well, I need to understand this last statement. Love is not a function of the brain. It cannot be eliminated by a brain disease. Faulty chemicals and circuits in the brain cannot affect love. Love is in our hearts and in our soul. Love endures. We've gone a long way in a short period of time. I'll stay around as long as you'd like to talk with me because I'd love to hear some of your stories as well. But I know that you have other places to go and be. Tomorrow at the Sunday school hour, I'll be talking about how to help folks who are hurting. And it'll sort of gradually talk about folks that are dealing with cancer, dealing with dementia, dealing with other chronic illnesses. What can we do to minister to them while they're living is what we'll do. Ron will be talking about 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and what the Bible has to say about the care that we're supposed to give others. I'm breaking things up here at the end. And then tomorrow night, I believe it's 5 o'clock, we'll end with ways we can help folks in dementia and cancer as well. Why don't we end with a word of prayer, and then again, as you'd like to stay around, as long as you'd like to and talk, I'd be glad to do so. But thank you so much for giving us your time, and I hope this has been helpful, and I really would appreciate your input on that. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this good day. Thank you for this good congregation. Thank you for these people in the throes of wherever they deal with to come and be a part of this. We ask that what has been said will be helpful to them and that you'll bless them as they bless their loved ones and see after those who have these illnesses. And ask, Father, that you'll bless this church as well. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for the hope that you give us in Christ. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen. Amen. God bless you.